All right, future diplomats, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going in deep on a topic that's, well, it's kind of the foundation for everything in international relations for the UPSC. You ready to tackle some political theory?
Absolutely. This deep dive is like think of it as like your starter pack for political theory. We'll unpack what it actually is, why it matters so much, especially if you're focused on IR and how it can help you understand the world you know even better than you do now.
So, I got to be honest. When some folks hear political theory, I think their eyes kind of glaze over. They're thinking old philosophers, boring textbooks. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. But honestly, it's the opposite of boring. It's like gaining a superpower. Like suddenly you can see the why behind all the global events.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So how does political theory give us those superpowers? How does it work?
Well, there's that famous Keynes quote, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's basically the ideas of economists and political philosophers are more powerful than we realize. In fact, he says, the world is ruled by little else.
It's like even if you're aiming for a practical career, like diplomacy, knowing the ideas behind everything is crucial.
Exactly. It's not just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding the values driving global politics, like what makes states tick.
So let's define it. What is political theory exactly?
Yeah.
It's going through our sources, and one definition from Cobbin really stood out. It's all about the should, not just the IS.
Whoa, Cobbin nailed it. It's like political science that explains what happens, facts and trends, but political theory dives into what should happen, the values, ethics, and the big questions about what the world could be.
So for someone studying international relations, it's not just knowing what countries are doing, but what they should be doing based on, justice, cooperation, all those ideals.
It's bigger than just like today's headlines, right? Political theory is about these timeless dilemmas, like the big questions that have shaped societies for centuries.
Like, what is justice? How should power be shared? What would a perfect world even look like?
Exactly. And those questions are always relevant. Like Berlin said, as long as humans try to explain their actions, political theory is vital.
Okay, so we've got a sense of what political theory is IS, but then our sources throw in all these other terms that sound really similar. Thought, philosophy, ideology. How can we tell them apart?
Yeah, it's a common confusion for
Yeah.
sure. Let's use the framework in the source material. It breaks it down really well.
Perfect, because I could definitely use a cheat sheet for this part.
Okay, so first we have political thought. This is the biggest category, like all the ideas and opinions in a society, the debates, the policy papers, you name it.
So like a Twitter thread about the UN or a report from a think tank, that would be political thought.
Exactly. Then we've got political philosophy. This is where it gets deeper, right? It grapples with the core concepts like justice, rights, even the good life.
Okay, so if thought is the raw material, philosophy is kind of like refining it, like digging into those deeper why
You
questions.
got it. Now, the last one, political ideology. This is where things get more, I guess, concrete. Ideologies aim for specific changes in society, often based on strongly held beliefs.
So philosophy is thinking about the big questions, and ideology is saying, okay, this is how we should organize society, and this is how we'll make it happen.
Exactly. And it's all linked to IR. Think about it. Marxist theory influencing a country's foreign policy, or how nationalism fuels global conflicts.
So they're distinct, but they all overlap.
Yeah, I mean, they all influence each other.
There's this other point in our sources of the feminist critique of political theory.
Yeah, and that's really important. See, traditionally, political theory focused on those big public institutions, states, governments, etc. But feminist scholars pointed out that view ignores all the power dynamics within families, societies, which then affect international relations.
Makes sense. It's like, how can you understand a country's foreign policy without considering the status of women, gender roles, the power structures within that society?
Exactly. And this has had a huge impact on how we think about IR today. Like, we're paying more attention to gender equality in peace talks and how a nation's internal issues impact its foreign policy. It's like the personal IS political and those domestic issues are intertwined with global politics.
So all this is super interesting, but I still wonder about those classic political thinkers, right? We're talking about folks from centuries ago. Why should a UPSC aspirant care about like what Plato had to say?
That's a great question, and one we'll dive into right after this. It's easy to think those classics aren't relevant today, but that's a big mistake. These thinkers, from Plato to Machiavelli, Hobbes, they tackled the big questions about power, about justice, the state, and those questions, they're still important today, even in our globalized world, right?
So we're not just talking about, like, historical trivia. There's real value here for someone trying to understand modern international
Oh,
relations.
tons of value. It's like they give you this framework, a way of looking at the world and the timeless problems in global politics. Take Hobbes, for example. His idea of the state of nature, where life is nasty, brutish, and short. Some argue it's super relevant to the international system, that kind of anarchy we see between states.
Okay, I'm listening. How does Hobbes' idea about individuals, the state of nature, relate to countries interacting on, the world stage?
Think about it. No global government, no one to enforce the rules globally, right? So states are always kind of competing for power, often out of fear, self-interest, just like those individuals in Hobbes' state of nature.
So even though there's no literal war of all against all between countries, there's this constant tension, right? Because there's no global power to keep everyone in check.
You got it. Hobbes said the solution was a social contract. People give up some freedom for the security a ruler provides. We don't have that globally, obviously, but that doesn't mean Hobbes is irrelevant.
So if you apply Hobbes to IR, cooperation becomes even more important. Since there's no higher power, countries have to find ways to work together, right? Or else it's constant conflict.
Exactly. And this is where understanding those classic theories can really help you. You start to see why institutions like the UN exist, why treaties are so important. It's about overcoming those challenges, that anarchy in the system.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. The classics aren't just dusty old books. They give us real tools to understand how global politics works. But speaking of modern challenges, our sources also mention globalization. It's changing the role of the nation state. So how does political theory have to adapt to, like, this new world?
This is where things get interesting, especially for IR. Globalization, it's like it's blurred the lines, right? You've got these non-state actors, the NGOs, the big corporations. Economic ties connect countries more closely. And then you have issues like terrorism, climate change. They demand global solutions.
It makes you wonder, do those old concepts, like sovereignty, even still apply in this messy, interconnected world?
That's the question, and it's one you'll be wrestling with as an IR expert. Political theory has to evolve to address these new challenges. Like, how do we even tackle these global problems when so much theory is built around the nation state?
Those are some serious questions. But this brings us back to that point. Political theory isn't just about it's about what ought to be, right? So we're not just analyzing how globalization is changing things, it's also about how we should respond to those changes.
Absolutely. Political theory helps us figure out our goals, our values, and then how to build systems, institutions that reflect those values,
Mhm.
even in this new global reality. And there's a quote from our sources. It really sums this up.
You're thinking of the one by Hannah Pitkin. It says, issues like religion or prices or race are not by nature a priori, either political or non-political. They are made or become political in certain times and places.
Yeah, that's it. It shows how dynamic politics really is. Things that seem domestic can suddenly become global issues. Think about human rights, right? Used to be a national thing, now it's a core part of international law and diplomacy.
So political theory, it's not set in stone. It's constantly changing, right? We're always figuring out what matters, what's right, and how to achieve those things in a world that's never standing still.
That's the idea. And for you, prepping for the UPSC, that means you need to be more than someone who just memorizes facts and theories, right? You got to apply those theories, analyze the complex stuff, and make your own arguments.
And that's helpful beyond just exams, right?
Yeah.
That critical thinking is valuable for, well, for anyone who wants to understand how the world works.
Exactly. So as you study for the UPSC, remember, political theory isn't just an academic exercise. It's like a set of tools. You can use it to understand the world and make sense of those complex global challenges. It's about building those thinking skills, that ability to analyze, see the connections that others might miss.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Mm.
But I don't know, I kind of find it exciting. Like, you're not just memorizing stuff, you're building this whole framework for understanding how the world works.
Right. And those skills, that's exactly what the UPSC is looking for.
I mean, it is.
Think about those terms we talked about, political thought, political philosophy, ideology. Those aren't just words, they're tools. You can use those to break down any IR issue you come across.
It's like you're reading an article about a conflict or something, and suddenly you see it, right? The underlying influences, the different perspectives.
You got it. And when you can identify those influences, you understand not just what they're saying, but why they're saying it. Like, what are their motivations? What are their values? That's powerful stuff. And that's the kind of insight that makes a great diplomat, a policy analyst, or just, well, an informed citizen, someone who can really engage in these big debates about the world.
So for anyone listening who's getting ready for the UPSC, hopefully this deep dive has shown you that political theory, it's not just some boring academic subject, right?
Yeah.
It's alive, it's constantly changing, and it's trying to keep up with our crazy, complex world.
Absolutely.
And by engaging with it, you're not just gaining knowledge, you're sharpening your critical thinking skills, which, let's face it, those are crucial for the UPSC.
Totally. It's about becoming a more, I guess, strategic thinker. You can see the big picture, the
Yeah.
historical context, the ethical dilemmas behind what's happening in the world. Those are the skills that make a difference, whether you're writing an essay for the exam, negotiating a treaty, or even just having an informed discussion about what matters.
This has been an awesome deep dive. We've covered so much. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, yeah.
Something to think about as they continue on their UPSC journey.
Sounds good.
We've talked a lot about how important it is to study the classics, right? Those big thinkers, their ideas. But we also have to remember that those thinkers were products of their time, their perspectives. Well, they were limited by their world.
Yeah, their social context, the culture, all of it.
So are you saying that while we should definitely learn from those thinkers, we should also maybe critique them a little, like challenge some of their assumptions?
Exactly. Like, a lot of those theories came from a world dominated by, well, by European powers. So you got to ask yourself, how do these theories account for the perspectives of colonized people? What about gender inequality, racial justice, economic exploitation, all those things we're grappling with today?
Those are great questions. And it brings us back to that idea, right? Political theory, it's not static. It's an ongoing conversation, right? We're always refining our understanding of how the world works, challenging those old assumptions. And as a future IR expert, you'll be part of that conversation.
It's exciting.
It is.
We've only just dipped our toes in the water with this deep dive, but hopefully it's made you curious, right? Giving you some ideas about how to tackle those big questions in international relations. Just keep exploring, keep challenging yourself, and never stop learning. That's the key.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're here to help you ace that UPSC exam and, well, become the awesome global thinkers and leaders you're meant to be.